What if the moment everyone misread was never meant to be distance at all, but a silent battle Dylan Wang was fighting long before the cameras began to roll? That is the question that cracks open the story, a question that transforms a single glance at the Weibo Awards into a narrative far deeper, far heavier, and far more human than any quick headline could contain. Because on that glittering night of flashing lights, sculpted smiles, and carefully managed appearances, something unusual happened. Dylan Wang, the actor known for his fiery chemistry with Shen Yue and their unshakable public bond, kept an unexpected distance. And the world noticed. But what the world did not know was that behind that distance lay a truth he could no longer keep silent. This is the story of what he finally revealed. The Weibo Awards that evening hummed with the electricity of an industry that thrives on spectacle. Golden beams swept across the venue as one celebrity after another stepped into view, yet the quiet anticipation resting on the audience's shoulders was reserved for two names alone. From their earliest days as the beloved screen pair who made hearts race in Meteor Garden, Dylan Wang and Shen Yue had built a legacy of on-screen intimacy so effortless that fans could not help but believe in it. Every reunion, every interaction, every whisper between them was magnified, studied, adored. So when the two finally appeared, expectation erupted into a silent roar. Shen Yue shimmered under the stage lights, exuding the grace and grounded warmth that had carried her through some of the most influential roles of her career. Dylan arrived moments later, confident, poised, yet strangely withdrawn. Instead of drifting toward her as he usually did, he kept to the far end of the stage. Instead of shared smiles, there was the faintest nod. Instead of a captured moment, there was an absence that echoed louder than applause ever could. The internet reacted instantly. Perhaps too instantly. Was it tension? A fallout? Something unspoken behind the scenes? For days, speculation swirled like a storm that refused to break. Social media debates intensified. Fans combed through videos frame by frame, as if searching for some hidden message. And then, when the questions reached their peak, Dylan spoke. Not with a defensive tone, not with irritation, but with a quiet shock of honesty. He began by admitting that he had seen the questions pile up. He had watched fans analyze every angle, every slowed-down clip, every rumor disguised as certainty. And though he had stayed silent at first, he now felt compelled to tell the truth. His voice steadied, but carried weight. He revealed that his distance from Shen Yue that night was not born from conflict, tension, or detachment. It was something far more personal, far more vulnerable. For weeks leading up to the ceremony, Dylan had been wrestling with overwhelming pressure, emotional exhaustion, and a private struggle he had worked tirelessly to hide. He confessed that he had wanted to protect not only his own image, but hers as well. He feared that if he approached her in that state, if the cameras caught even a flicker of what he was battling internally, the narrative would twist into something neither of them deserved. He said that he kept his distance because he respected her. Because in that moment, the last thing he wanted was to drag her into a storm she didn't even know he was weathering. And then came the most unexpected part of his revelation. Dylan spoke about how deeply he valued Shen Yue as a colleague, a friend, and someone who had stood beside him through some of the most defining years of his career. He admitted that sometimes the emotions fans see between them are real, not in the romantic sense that the public insists on creating, but in the profound connection they've built from navigating fame, scrutiny, and growth together. He said he was grateful for her presence that night, even from a distance, because simply knowing she was there gave him a sense of grounding he desperately needed. His admission redefined the narrative completely. What looked like avoidance was actually an act of quiet protection. What looked like indifference was a shield he held up to prevent misunderstandings. What looked like coldness was actually the weight of his own unspoken battles. But perhaps the most cinematic twist of all came in his final lines. He confessed that after the ceremony, when the lights dimmed and the crowd thinned, Shen Yue herself approached him backstage. Not with accusation, not with curiosity, but with the kind of understanding that only someone who has walked similar paths could offer. She gently asked if he was all right, and in that moment, he finally allowed himself to breathe. He said that her simple question, delivered away from cameras and audience expectations, was what reminded him why their bond mattered so much in the first place. Two people, two journeys, two lives shaped by fame and watched by millions. And yet, in a quiet hallway behind the shimmering facade of the Weibo Awards, they were simply Dylan and Shen Yue again. No scripts, no cameras, no theories, just truth. He ended his statement with one final thought, one that sent a quiet tremor through the fandom. People see distance on stage, but they rarely see the understanding behind the curtain. And sometimes, the real story isn't in the spotlight at all. It's in the shadows, where two people stand quietly, choosing to protect one another in ways the world may never fully understand. And perhaps that is the most extraordinary part of all. A distance that was never distance, a silence that revealed more than it hid, and a moment that rewrote everything the audience thought they saw. But the story did not end with Dylan's quiet confession. In fact, what unfolded afterward reshaped the public's entire understanding of that night, pulling them deeper into a world where every breath is scrutinized, every gesture becomes a headline, and every silence is interpreted as a secret. Because when Dylan's words spread across social media, something unusual happened. Instead of calming the storm, his honesty stirred a new wave of curiosity, a deeper hunger for answers. Why had he carried that weight alone? Why had he chosen silence over seeking comfort from someone who had once been his safest presence? And, perhaps the most haunting question of all, what else happened that night, behind the shimmering curtain of the Weibo Awards, that the world had never been allowed to see? The truth, as it always does, begins in the spaces between what was shown and what was felt. As the ceremony progressed that evening, those who watched closely saw the faint tremors in Dylan's expression. A rare vulnerability, a crack in the armor of the star who had learned to master the stage as effortlessly as he breathed. Shen Yue noticed it too. Even from her seat across the hall, even from a distance widened by circumstance, she sensed that something in him was not right. Years of shared experiences had taught her the subtle language of his emotions, the slight tension in his jaw, the way his gaze lingered a moment longer on the floor, the heaviness behind every controlled smile. And yet, she respected the invisible barrier he had placed between them, because she knew it wasn't rejection. It was protection. While the cameras searched for interaction, while fans waited for a reunion worthy of their golden age, the two moved through the evening like parallel stars, always close, never colliding, each orbit shaped by unspoken understanding. But fate has a way of pulling truths into the light. After the final award was announced, after thunderous applause faded into scattered conversations and hurried footsteps, Dylan slipped away from the stage. He walked through a narrow back corridor, away from the glow of the cameras, away from the eyes that demanded perfection. He needed a moment, just one, where he could breathe without performing. What he did not expect was that Shen Yue had followed. She found him leaning against a quiet corner, head bowed slightly, as if the night had finally caught up to him. He didn't hear her approach, not until she spoke in that soft, steady tone that had once calmed entire sets during their most chaotic filming days. "You don't have to hide from me." He looked up, startled. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The corridor held its breath. She stepped closer, not touching, but grounding him with her presence alone. She reminded him of who he was before the noise, before the pressure, before the world demanded more than he could give. He confessed that he felt stretched thin, that he feared being misread, that he didn't want the headlines to twist his exhaustion into drama, especially when she was involved. He admitted that he worried any moment between them, any glance, any smile, would be magnified beyond recognition. And the irony was bitter. In protecting her, he had created the misunderstanding he wanted to avoid. But Shen Yue didn't respond with frustration. Instead, she offered a quiet truth of her own. She told him that distance doesn't protect people. Silence doesn't erase pressure. Pretending to be invincible doesn't make the weight easier to carry. And then she said the words that reshaped everything. You don't have to stand alone just because the world is watching. For the first time that night, Dylan allowed the tension to drop from his shoulders. Not fully, not dramatically, but enough for her to see the real struggle, the one he hid behind perfected stage presence. And that was when she did the most unexpected thing. She smiled. Not the dazzling red carpet smile that fans adore. Not the charming, camera-ready expression that lives in countless screenshots. A simple, warm, human smile. A reminder that beyond the spotlight, beyond the rumors, beyond the carefully constructed public image, they were still two people who understood each other better than most. Two people who had weathered years of scrutiny together. Two people who knew the difference between staged chemistry and genuine, time-earned connection. When the world looks at a distance, it sees emptiness. But sometimes distance is simply a way of creating space, to breathe, to recover, to protect something fragile. And that night, Dylan's distance was not a wall. It was a shield he carried until he had enough strength to share the truth. And Shen Yue, quietly, gracefully, became the only person he allowed inside that guarded space. What the cameras captured was only the surface. What they missed was the moment that truly mattered. A moment where honesty broke through performance. A moment where friendship outshone speculation. A moment that changed the way Dylan and Shen Yue moved through the world from that night onward. Because sometimes the greatest revelations don't happen under the lights. They happen in the quiet, in the corner of a backstage hallway, where two people stand together, no longer separated by applause.